On a stormy day, a grocery clerk threw herself into harm's way to save a little girl from a speeding truck. She asked for nothing in return, only soft words to calm the child's trembling. When the girl's wealthy father tried to repay her, she quietly refused. Neither of them could know that this single act of mercy would spark a bond powerful enough to change all their lives forever. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let us know. The rain came down hard that evening, heavy drops slapping against the pavement and bouncing off the hoods of passing cars. Sharon pulled her jacket tighter around her body as she hurried along the sidewalk, her shoes already soaked through. She had finished her shift at the grocery store late, and all she wanted was to get home before the storm grew worse. Her mind was on the long walk ahead when a small figure darted into the street. Sharon froze for half a second, her stomach twisting. A little girl was running with her arms flailing, the rain plastering her light hair against her cheeks. The child could not have been more than 6 or 7. Sharon's heart leapt into her throat when she saw the headlights of a truck bearing down, the squeal of its brakes fighting against the slick road. She did not think. She dropped the grocery bag in her hand and bolted forward, the water splashing high around her ankles. She threw her arms around the girl just as the truck skidded to a stop, the sound of burning rubber filling the air. Sharon and the child tumbled into a shallow pool at the side of the street, both of them gasping from shock. The girl clung to Sharon's waist, trembling, her small fingers digging into Sharon's wet uniform. Sharon's chest heaved, her pulse pounding so loudly that she could barely hear the horn blaring from the stopped truck. The girl's eyes were wide with fear, her lips quivering as if words could not form. Sharon pressed the child closer, whispering softly, "It's all right, I've got you. You're safe now." Her voice shook, but she held on tight, knowing the girl needed steadiness more than anything in that moment. People gathered quickly, umbrellas rising above the sidewalk, shoes splashing into the puddles. An elderly woman hurried forward, her face creased with concern. "Oh my goodness, sweetie, are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling beside them despite the muddy water soaking her coat. A young mother approached with a blanket, wrapping it around both Sharon and the child. "Here, this will help keep you warm until her parents get here." Another woman called out, "Someone call 911, make sure the little one's okay." The crowd that formed was filled with worried voices, people offering to help, to call for medical attention, to stay until the child was safely reunited with her family. Sharon felt the warmth of their kindness even through the cold rain. These were good people, she realized, people who saw a child in danger and a woman who had acted to save her, nothing more and nothing less. Then a voice shouted, urgent and breaking, "Julie!" Logan burst through the crowd, his coat plastered to his shoulders, his eyes wide with terror. He held Julie so tightly that his arms ached, her damp hair sticking to his cheek as she buried herself against him. His mind kept circling the same thought, sharp and unbearable. "I almost lost her. If that woman hadn't," the words would not form, and when he looked at Sharon standing drenched with water dripping from her sleeves, his throat locked. Julie's small voice trembled as she whispered, "She saved me, Daddy. The nice lady saved me." Logan's eyes met Sharon's, and she saw the raw gratitude there, mixed with the terror of a father who had nearly lost everything. The elderly woman who had first approached placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This young woman is a hero," she said firmly. She didn't hesitate for a second. Sharon stood slowly, water still dripping from her clothes. She could see that Logan wanted to speak, wanted to find words that could possibly express what he was feeling, but she also saw how he needed to focus entirely on his daughter right now. "She's safe," Sharon said quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. "That's all that matters." Before Logan could respond, before the crowd could gather closer, Sharon had already begun to step back. She picked up her scattered groceries from the puddle, most of them ruined but 1 or 2 items salvageable. The blanket slipped from her shoulders as she moved. "Wait," Logan called out, his voice catching. "Please, I need to." But Sharon was already walking away, her figure disappearing into the curtain of rain. She had done what needed to be done. A child was safe, back in her father's arms, and that was enough. The thanks she needed wasn't in words, it was in the sound of Julie's relieved sobs and the sight of them holding each other tight. Logan stood in the rain, holding his daughter, watching the woman who had saved her walk away into the storm. The elderly woman beside him shook her head in amazement. "Angels walk among us," she murmured. "Some people are just put here to help." The crowd began to disperse, offering final words of comfort and relief. The truck driver, shaken but grateful no one was hurt, exchanged information with Logan before driving carefully away. Through it all, Logan kept looking in the direction Sharon had gone, as if he could will her to return so he could properly thank her. That night, the storm rattled the windows as he sat alone in his study with Julie finally asleep upstairs. He opened his laptop, searching, pulling threads together with practiced ease until a name surfaced. Sharon Williams, 34, grocery store clerk. A stranger who had become the most important person in his world for one crucial moment. He leaned back, restless, the image of her walking away still vivid. From Julie's room came the sound of her voice on a video call. Margaret's face glowed on the tablet screen, her tone warm and concerned. "Grandma, a lady saved me today," Julie said, her eyes bright despite the lingering traces of fear. "She pulled me away before the truck could hit me." Margaret was quiet for a moment, then her voice filled with genuine emotion. "Then your daddy must find a way to thank her properly. People like that, they're rare and precious." Logan lingered in the hallway, listening, feeling a question form in his chest that he knew would not leave him alone. By morning he understood what he had to do. He would find her. He owed her more than thanks, he owed her the chance to let him express what her courage had meant. The next morning, Sharon woke up to the rattling sound of the old heater in her apartment. The gray light of dawn leaked through the thin curtains, and the air inside still carried the damp chill from last night's storm. She pushed herself up slowly, her body heavy with fatigue. On the chair hung her uniform, the faded supermarket polo and black apron, waiting like an old habit she could never escape. On the table sat a stack of bills she had not touched. A few envelopes were marked past due. She pressed her lips together and turned her eyes away, reaching instead for the small plastic pillbox. In the next room her mother coughed lightly, a sound soft but weighted. Sharon walked in quietly, set down a glass of water, and her mother gave her a tired smile. "You're always rushing, baby." Sharon touched her hand gently, promising that everything would be fine, though both of them knew money was tight and time tighter. At the bathroom mirror, Sharon paused. Her reflection showed a woman in her mid-30s with weary eyes, hair still damp in curls from the storm. She thought of Julie's arms clutching her, of the squeal of brakes, of how close everything had come to ending differently. Her jaw tightened, not from regret, but from the memory of fear she had seen in the child's eyes. She slipped into her uniform, tied the apron around her waist, and tucked a worn notebook into her bag. Once it had held case notes and essays for her law classes, now it was filled with grocery lists and reminders for doctor's appointments. She shut the door softly behind her and walked to the bus stop, bracing herself for another long day under fluorescent lights and endless customers. The supermarket hummed with the noise of carts rolling and registers beeping. Sharon kept her head down, moving through routine, restocking shelves, greeting regulars, answering questions with patient ease. She smiled when she had to, but her thoughts lingered elsewhere, replaying Julie's trembling whisper, "She saved me." Near midday, she was wiping her hands on her apron when she noticed a tall man at the end of her aisle. Logan, his presence seemed to shift the air. His suit looked out of place among discount signs and crowded shelves. He walked toward her with measured steps, a plain envelope in hand. He stopped in front of her, his face drawn from a night without sleep. He held out the envelope, his voice steady but quiet. "It's just a way to say thank you." Sharon glanced at the envelope, then back at him. She did not take it. Instead she wiped her hands slowly on her apron and lifted her chin. "I don't need that," she said softly but firmly. "Yesterday wasn't about money." Logan blinked, caught off guard. For a moment he didn't know what to say. Gratitude and guilt mingled in his eyes. Shoppers passed by, some slowing just enough to sense that something important was being said. Sharon's voice softened. "I once studied law. I wanted to stand up for children who had no voice. When my mom got sick, I left school to care for her. That's why I'm here now." She touched her apron lightly, then let her hand fall. "It isn't the path I planned, but I do what I can." Logan lowered the envelope, his gaze fixed on her. He swallowed, then spoke quietly. I should have thanked you yesterday. Properly, but I couldn't find the words. I still can't. Her eyes met his, steady and calm. Just make sure your little girl never feels alone. That's all the thanks I need. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The clatter of carts, the murmur of shoppers returned around them, but in that small space something had shifted. Logan had expected polite acceptance or distance. What he found instead was a glimpse of a woman who carried strength quietly, even in the face of her own struggles. Finally, he tucked the envelope back into his jacket, his voice rough. I understand. It wasn't much, but it was honest. Sharon gave a small nod and returned to her work, lining up cans on the shelf, yet the weight of the exchange lingered in the air, even after Logan stepped back. That evening, Logan sat in his study, rain tapping against the wide windows. Julie was asleep upstairs. He opened his laptop, his hands moving with practiced ease until her name appeared, Sharon Williams. 34, grocery store clerk. Once enrolled in law school, withdrew after her mother's illness, no records, no blemishes, just an ordinary woman whose path had been reshaped by circumstance. He leaned back, staring at the screen. He replayed her words, the way she had refused the envelope, the way she had asked for nothing but love for his daughter. A thought began to form, fragile but insistent. Maybe there was a way to honor both her lost dream and his daughter's healing. It was only a seed of an idea, but it was enough to keep him awake long into the night. It was Saturday afternoon, just 2 days after the storm. The sky had finally cleared, pale blue stretching wide above the city. Logan had hoped for a quiet day at home, but Julie had been tugging at his sleeve since breakfast. Daddy, we need to go see her, she said with her small voice, insistent. See who? He asked, though he already knew. Miss Sharon, the lady who saved me. At first, Logan tried to distract her with cartoons and a board game, but Julie's determination only grew. She repeated Sharon's name the way children do when something truly matters, her eyes shining with stubborn hope. Margaret, his sister, had reminded him the night before, you owe that woman thanks. Now, with Julie refusing to let go, Logan found himself without excuses. By mid-afternoon, he guided their car into the supermarket parking lot. Julie pressed her face to the glass, as if Sharon might be waiting outside just for her. Logan's chest tightened. He had replayed that night in the rain, headlights, screeching brakes, and the stranger's steady arms around his daughter. The shame of walking away without a word still pressed heavily on him. All right, he murmured as he cut the engine. Julie was already unbuckling her seatbelt. Let's find her. Inside, the store buzzed with the ordinary rhythm of carts, rattling and scanners beeping. Sharon stood at register 3, her uniform apron tied neatly at her waist, her hands moving with practiced steadiness. Though she had slept a little better, the storm of the other night lingered in her chest. She reminded herself to breathe, to keep her voice even, to focus on one customer at a time. Good morning, she said to an older man buying bread and milk. He nodded, paid in cash, and shuffled away. The line shifted forward. Sharon kept her rhythm. Near the entrance, Logan held Julie's hand. He had dressed down in a dark sweater and jeans, but his presence still carried weight. We'll say thank you to Miss Sharon, he told his daughter gently. Julie nodded firmly. Miss Sharon, she whispered, practicing the name. They reached the end of Sharon's lane, just as she finished with a customer. Sharon looked up, and for a brief moment her breath caught. Then she steadied herself, offering her professional smile. Hi there, did you find everything you needed? Julie slipped free from her father and ran to the counter. Miss Sharon, she cried, arms lifted. Sharon blinked, surprised, then rounded the register to crouch at the girl's height. Hey sweetheart, she said softly. How are you today? I'm good, thank you for saving me. Julie wrapped her arms around Sharon's neck with fierce determination. A few shoppers paused to watch. One mother murmured to her child, "Don't bother the lady," but Julie turned her head, insisting, "But she saved me." The tightness in Sharon's chest eased. She hugged Julie back briefly, then guided her to the side so the lane stayed clear. "I'm glad you're okay," she said warmly. "You were very brave." Logan stepped forward with a basket of apples, bread and eggs. "We came to say thank you," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You already did," Sharon answered, glancing toward Julie with a faint smile. She scanned the items, the register beeping calmly. The manager lingered nearby, but seeing nothing amiss, drifted away. When the sale was finished, Julie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Can I show Miss Sharon my drawing?" She pulled a folded paper from her pocket and held it up. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright sun, a tall man, a little girl with curls, and a smiling woman. At the bottom the name Julie. Sharon smoothed the crease gently. "It's beautiful, thank you for sharing it with me." Julie beamed, tucked the drawing back into her pocket, and clutched her stuffed rabbit. Logan cleared his throat. "Do you have a minute?" he asked Sharon. "We can step aside." Sharon glanced at the next lane, saw it was open, then nodded. She called to a coworker, "I'm taking a quick break," got a nod, and walked with them to a quiet corner near a display of paper towels. Julie crouched down and rolled her apples along the floor like toy cars. Logan kept one eye on her before speaking low. "I've been thinking about what you said, about law, about wanting to help kids who don't have a voice." Sharon folded her hands. "That was a long time ago. Life went another way. Do you still want it?" She looked at Julie, who hummed to herself, and answered honestly. "Wanting and being able are 2 different things. Dreams don't pay hospital bills." Logan nodded slowly. "I understand." He paused. "But what if we tried something small? Not waiting for perfect circumstances, just starting where we are." Sharon tilted her head. "Like what?" "A weekend program," he said. "Reading help, a safe space, workshops about safety, listening, belonging. You'd lead it, not as a favor to me, but as your work." Sharon studied him carefully. She saw no pity, only sincerity. "Why me?" "Because Julie lights up when she sees you. Because you stepped in when no one else did. Because you know the difference between a dream and reality, and you still carry it." Something stirred in her chest. Not excitement, something steadier. She let it settle. "I can't leave my job, and I won't be a symbol. No cameras. No speeches," he promised. "We start small, quiet, a room at the community center. Books, snacks, clear rules, and kids who know they're safe." Sharon considered. "Who pays for it?" "I will," Logan said. "And I'll find others, but you set the rules." Julie stood and placed an apple in Sharon's hand. "For you." Sharon crouched. "Thank you, honey." She rose again. "I'm not promising anything," she told Logan. "But talking is fine. If we do this, it's for the kids, not your name." "Agreed." Sharon glanced at the clock. "I have to get back. Of course I'll draft something short. Practical. Then maybe I'll look at it." Julie slipped her hand into Sharon's for a quick squeeze. "Bye, Miss Sharon. I'll bring another drawing." "I'll look forward to it," Sharon said softly. They returned to the flow of shoppers. Logan steered the cart toward the doors, but he glanced back once. Sharon was already at her register, scanning items with her usual calm. Something had shifted. Later, during her break, Sharon sat in the staff room with the hum of a soda machine. She opened her old notebook, the one from college, and on a blank page wrote 3 short lines: "Safe room, listening circle, reading buddy." She closed the notebook quietly. Not a promise. Not yet. But the weight in her chest eased. Outside in the parking lot, Logan buckled Julie into her seat. "Miss Sharon is nice." Julie said. "She is," he answered. As he shut the door, a word passed through his mind and stayed there. Lightkeepers. He kept it unspoken, saving it for the day the idea would need a name. Inside the store, Sharon returned to Register 3, her name tag glinting under the fluorescent light. The line moved, the scanners beeped, and the ordinary day carried on. Yet somewhere between the shelves and the notebooks, a new beginning waited, small but steady, like the first light after a storm. Julie became the bridge. Every morning, her small voice carried Sharon's name across the breakfast table. "Miss Sharon reads better than the library lady," she told her father one day, clutching a crayon drawing. "She made me laugh when I was scared of the thunder." At bedtime she whispered about Sharon's stories, her words glowing with admiration. Logan listened quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes uneasy. He told himself to be cautious, yet he could not deny how Sharon's presence seemed to light a path back to Julie's laughter. That weekend when Julie begged for an outing, Logan surprised himself by agreeing. He called Sharon, his voice even but uncertain, asking if she might join them. She hesitated at first. "People will talk," she murmured, but his reply was steady. "Let them. Julie wants this, I'll handle it." At the park, the early autumn air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Sharon arrived in her simple cardigan and slacks, her steps careful across the grass. Julie raced to her holding a storybook. Soon they were sitting on the lawn, the child in her lap, Sharon's voice weaving the tale with a warmth that drew in two other children who wandered close. Logan stood a short distance away, watching. He had seen influence before, voices commanding boardrooms, wealth-shifting decisions, but here was a power entirely different. Sharon had no stage, no microphone, only presence. And yet children leaned closer, eyes wide, as if the story belonged to them too. A knot tightened in his chest. She was not someone needing rescue, but someone whose quiet strength had been buried under circumstance. The following week, the library confirmed it. When the scheduled volunteer failed to appear, Sharon stepped forward without hesitation, book in hand. Logan sat at the back, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his eyes never left her. Children laughed, answered her questions in shy voices, clapped when she finished. Julie sat proudly in the front row, her little chest puffed out each time Sharon looked her way. That night, Logan tucked his daughter into bed with less worry than usual. The shadows that had haunted her dreams seemed lighter. But Sharon, returning home, felt a weight of a different kind. In the quiet of her small apartment, she searched his name at last. The results startled her. Logan Whitmore, pages filled with articles, corporate projects, philanthropic boards. He was not simply a widowed father she had met by chance, he was a man of influence, the kind she had once dreamed of becoming, when law school still seemed possible. The knowledge left her wary. She did not want to be small in his shadow, nor mistaken for someone seeking advantage. And yet she could not forget how he had sat quietly at the library, not as a man of status, but as a father watching his child's laughter return. Their paths crossed more often after that. Logan offered to drive her when shifts ended late, sometimes dropping her at the bus stop, sometimes further. The rides were short, the conversations quiet, but they opened doors neither had touched in years. One evening, rain pattered on the windshield, and Logan admitted, almost reluctantly, "I never know if I'm doing right by her. Emily was always the gentle one." His voice broke slightly on his late wife's name. Sharon, clutching her worn notebook on her lap, spoke softly. "No one knows for certain, you just keep showing up. That's what matters." Another night, when he asked about the notebook, she confessed it had once held case notes from law school, dreams she left behind when her mother fell ill. "Now it's grocery lists and doctor reminders," she said with a small laugh, but her eyes betrayed the ache of that sacrifice. Logan listened, more deeply than he intended, his respect for her growing with every word. Julie remained the most faithful witness. One evening, she picked up the phone and called her grandmother. Her little voice bubbled with excitement. "Grandma, Miss Sharon read to me again today. She helped me draw a picture for Daddy. You should have seen it." On the other end, Margaret's fingers tightened around the receiver. Each mention of Sharon's name was a sting. She had already lost her daughter Emily. The thought of another woman filling the child's heart was unbearable. Grief sharpened into disdain. "That's enough now," she told Julie quickly, ending the call before her trembling voice could betray her. Margaret's unease deepened over the following weeks. At church luncheons and neighborhood gatherings, she overheard whispers, people marveling at the way Logan's daughter clung to the grocery clerk who had saved her life. Margaret kept her composure, but each comment fed her fear that Emily's place was being rewritten, her memory replaced. Still, a tiny sliver of curiosity remained. Once she lingered in her car outside the library, watching Sharon read to children. She expected to see clumsy pretension, but what she saw instead unsettled her more. Sharon's voice was low and steady, her manner gentle, and Julie's smile brighter than Margaret had seen in months. It was harder to dismiss when witnessed with her own eyes. Logan, unaware of Margaret's quiet surveillance, found himself more entangled in Sharon's presence. One evening, after dropping her at her stop, he said quietly, "You have a gift with children." She gripped her bag strap, uneasy. It doesn't pay the bills. His reply was soft, almost tentative. What if we did something more, not just for Julie, for others too? I'd like to hear your ideas. Sharon blinked, unsure if he was serious. But his gaze held steady. Come by the house tomorrow, we'll talk while Julie's awake. She'd like that. She hesitated. People will talk, but his answer was firm. Let them. That Sunday, Sharon entered the Whitmore home with careful steps, her old notebook tucked under her arm. The polished wood, framed photographs, and quiet elegance made her feel suddenly small. Julie rushed forward, tugging her to the living room. Read this one, Miss Sharon. Sharon smiled, settling onto the rug. Her voice carried through the house, low and warm, weaving comfort around the child in her lap. Julie giggled, leaning against her side, unafraid, unguarded. Logan lingered in the hall, a quiet smile softening his face as he stepped aside to take a call. For the first time in a long while, the house sounded alive, not with polite silence, but with laughter. The front door opened. Margaret stepped inside, her coat still on her shoulders, pearls at her neck. Her silvered hair framed a face dignified but marked by sorrow. She froze at the sight before her. Julie nestled against Sharon's arm, Sharon's voice filling the home as though it belonged there. Her face hardened, her hand trembled, but her voice was sharp. Don't you dare think you can replace my daughter. The room stilled. Sharon closed the book gently, lifting her gaze. Her reply was steady, quiet but unflinching. I would never try to replace her. Margaret's lips pressed thin. I see how she clings to you. You're just a store clerk who happened to be there. She would not speak Sharon's name, only you, stripping her of identity. Julie clutched Sharon's sleeve, her little voice urgent. But Grandma, she saved me. Margaret's eyes flickered, but she pulled the child close. Enough. Silence settled, heavy and suffocating. Sharon's chest ached, but she held her dignity. She could feel the woman's grief pulsing beneath the anger, a wound so raw it cut everyone it touched. From the hallway, Logan ended his call and stepped forward, his face pale. He had not expected the collision to come so soon. Now, with his daughter trembling, his mother-in-law seething, and Sharon standing silent in the center, he understood the past and the present had finally met, and he would have to decide where he stood. The night after, Margaret's sharp words still clung to the walls of the Whitmore home like smoke that refused to clear. Logan sat in his study long after midnight, the lamp burning low, papers scattered but unread. He could still hear Margaret's voice, cold, brittle, laced with grief. Emily was my daughter. Do you really think she'd want her child raised by a stranger from a grocery store? And his own reply, trembling yet resolute, what Emily wanted was Julie's smile. And Sharon gave that back. He had spoken the truth, but the truth cost him. Margaret was family, his last tie to Emily. Sharon was an outsider, yet she had brought laughter back into his daughter's life. Logan pressed his hands over his face, feeling as though he were being torn in two directions, past and present, grinding against each other, with no peace between them. The following week carried a strange mixture of tension and momentum. The town was preparing for the annual Lightkeepers festival, a community event that had started as a small neighborhood gathering years ago but had grown into something larger, with local press and charities involved. Logan had taken on sponsorship quietly, wanting the festival to shine as a beacon of hope. This year, the festival carried extra weight. It was the first since Emily's death. Everyone expected Logan Whitmore to appear, to make a speech, to reassure the town that grief hadn't extinguished his family's light. Sharon, meanwhile, hadn't planned to attend at all. Festivals weren't for people like her, people who slipped through crowds unnoticed, who carried bills folded tightly in their wallets, and wore the same jacket winter after winter. But Julie begged, Miss Sharon, come see the lanterns with me. Please, they look like stars in the sky. Sharon hesitated. She knew people talked already, yet when Julie wrapped her small arms around her waist, gazing up with eyes so like her mother's, Sharon couldn't say no. The night of the festival, strings of lights stretched across the park like golden vines. Booths lined the walkways, children painting, families buying kettle corn, musicians filling the air with fiddles and drums. Lanterns waited in neat rows for the evening's release, each carrying a slip of paper where townsfolk wrote prayers, dreams or memories. Logan arrived in his usual pressed suit, though without the stiffness of boardrooms. Julie held his hand, her excitement bubbling as she darted from booth to booth. Sharon walked beside them in her simple cardigan, her presence drawing curious glances from neighbors. Some whispered, some smiled kindly, others looked away. She kept her chin level, focusing on Julie's laughter. The program began at dusk. A stage had been set up near the fountain, reporters clustered with cameras ready. Logan was called forward to speak. He glanced once toward Sharon and Julie, Julie waving proudly from the grass, Sharon quietly keeping her close. Then he stepped onto the platform. His voice carried steady through the microphone. He spoke not of wealth or legacy but of memory, resilience, and the power of community to hold one another through the dark. Lightkeepers, he said, is not about the lanterns we release tonight. It is about the hands that lift them together, so no flame has to rise alone. Applause rippled through the crowd. As the ceremony continued, children were invited onto the stage to share short readings. Julie tugged on Sharon's sleeve. "Miss Sharon, come with me. Please read with me." Before Sharon could protest, the child was pulling her toward the steps. A hush fell as the two climbed up. Julie, bouncing with excitement, and Sharon uncertain but composed. The announcer, sensing the moment, handed Sharon a book of children's poems. Sharon opened it, her voice trembling at first, but as she read, the words settled into rhythm. Her tone softened, carried warmth, drawing the crowd closer without effort. Children in the audience leaned forward, parents smiled. She invited Julie to join in on the rhymes, pausing so the little girl could chime her part. Laughter rose when Julie mispronounced a word, and Sharon kissed her hair, encouraging her gently to try again. It was simple, a story, a rhyme, a shared laugh, yet the park seemed to hush around them, as if the lanterns themselves leaned in to listen. Sharon's gift was not performance but presence, the ability to make every child feel seen, every voice welcome. Near the front, Margaret arrived, pearls at her throat, her coat draped elegantly. She had not intended to come, but Julie's nightly phone calls about Miss Sharon had become impossible to ignore. Her heart clenched when she saw her granddaughter glowing with joy, clinging to another woman's side as though she belonged there. As Sharon closed the book, the crowd applauded warmly. Julie hugged her, whispering, "That was perfect." Sharon smiled, brushing the child's hair back. Then Margaret's voice pierced the air, sharp enough to cut through applause. "This is just a show." All eyes turned. She stepped forward, her expression tight with grief and indignation. "You're using a black woman to cover your ambition, Logan. She will never be Emily." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Logan stiffened on the sidelines, but before he could speak, Sharon did. She stepped forward, her hand still resting lightly on Julie's shoulder. "You're right," Sharon said softly, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I'll never be Emily. I couldn't. She was your daughter, and Julie's mother. Nothing I do could change that." She paused, breathing carefully. "But I don't need to replace her. I only need Julie to know she isn't alone. That's what justice means to me." Her words were not loud, but they held weight. The audience fell still, not out of politeness, but because something in her tone demanded listening. Julie turned to her grandmother, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Grandma, she makes me smile again. Mommy would want that." The innocence of the child's words struck harder than any argument. Margaret faltered. The crowd blurred around her. All she could see was Julie, bright-eyed, alive in a way she had not been since Emily's death. Margaret's throat tightened. For weeks she had seen Sharon as a threat, an intruder in sacred territory. But now, watching the child press her cheek to Sharon's arm, she felt something inside her crack open. Her lips parted, trembling. She whispered, almost unwilling, maybe you're giving back what Emily no longer can." The announcer, sensing the moment, guided the program back to the lantern release. People began lighting the small candles inside the paper lanterns, carrying them to the fountain. Logan moved to Sharon's side, his hand brushing Julie's shoulder. For a moment they stood together, three figures framed by the rising glow. Margaret lingered behind, her face unreadable but her eyes moist. One by one, lanterns lifted into the night sky, tiny flames ascending into darkness. Julie clapped, pointing. "Look, Miss Sharon, they're going to heaven." Sharon knelt beside her. "Maybe they're carrying all our wishes up with them." Logan's gaze softened as he watched them. The tension of the past weeks did not vanish, but in that moment he glimpsed something beyond conflict, something like hope. Margaret stood apart, but when Julie called out, "Grandma, come help me let one go," she found herself walking forward. Julie placed the lantern between them, her small hands guiding Margaret's trembling fingers. Together they lifted it, Sharon watching quietly from the side. The lantern rose, drifting higher, carrying with it grief, love, and the fragile beginnings of understanding. For the first time since Emily's passing, Margaret did not feel entirely alone in her mourning. And for Sharon, standing still in the glow of lantern light, it was the first time she dared believe her place in Julie's life was more than temporary.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.